Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how easy it can be to draw a protea in pencil. Firstly, you're going to need a book or a sketch pad to press on, because when you shade, if you shade directly on a table, sometimes the grains and markings of the table will come through, then it will ruin your picture. You're going to need a pencil to draw with. Make sure that your pencil has a B in it, so it doesn't matter if it's a 2B or 4B or a 6B. It's just a softer pencil and it's much easier to blend it than if you use an HB or a 2H, for example. And then an eraser. An eraser is not only for rubbing out mistakes, it is also a drawing tool. So before we start sketching in our protea, we're going to get the rough shape of it to give us an idea of where we should draw all the petal lines to, and so that we don't get confused and lost in the details. So we're first going to start with a cone shape, which is almost like an upside down V. Now don't make your V two straight lines. They should be curved lines. The center of a protea has a curved shape. So think of like a curved V. Okay, and then the bottom of the protea is an almost identical shape. It's just slightly bigger. So again, this nice curved V. And it should go past the protea and past the bottom of this V. But we're going to make a C shape to join these two lines together now. Now this line that I've just drawn here is going to show us the height that each of the petals should be at. And we're going to make the petals slightly different heights, but in general they should stay along this line. And then around the other side of the plant, we're going to draw another curved line. I want you to try and make this curved line go over this point of the V. So depending on the angle that you're drawing the protea, it might be below it, but for this picture, we want our curve to be above the center of the protea. Okay, so my petals that are at the back need to kind of run along that line. Okay, and this just helps us stay on track, as I said. Right, we're going to start with an easy bit. So that is going to be just drawing the petals in. And they're kind of like kite shapes, each of these petals. And we're going to start with one right at the bottom here at the base. So I'm just drawing in a kite shape using the outline of the base to help me. And then on each side of that, I'm going to draw two more kite shapes, or it's almost like scales here that kind of overlap each other, but they are triangular shaped or pointed. Now, as we add leaves later, the leaves are going to go over some of these petals, but we just are getting the shape right so that we can start building up the flower. So we will draw over some of these lines later on. Don't press too hard. Okay, try not to make the edge of the next petal come from the point, so make it just below the point. Okay, this one here, I'm going to try and bring it up close to the line. Now, something to remember when you are drawing petals on a flower is that no two petals are exactly symmetrical and the same. In nature, they're all a little bit different, so don't try and make them all the same thickness and the same height. It's not going to look natural. If you make them a little different, it's going to make your flower look a lot more realistic. Okay, I'm bringing one up again to this point. You can even bring them a little bit past the point. So this is just a guide so that we know where we're aiming for. You can see I've come out of my cone shape here, and that's also fine. This is just a rough guide, so don't have this perfectly triangular shape at the end of your picture. As you get towards the edge of the flower, the lines should have a little bit of a curve. So they're quite straight lines here, but from the side we're seeing that curve of the petal. So add a bit more of a curve. Here I'm just drawing a really skinny one because it's a total side view of that petal. Okay, as you start going around the corner, you can take them up to this back line here. By adding this line, the second line, it makes it look like the petal's curving slightly, and it just makes it look a bit more three-dimensional. So these petals that are just on the sides of the plant, just by adding this little extra line, you give it a bit more depth. Okay, I'm going to just extend this one past the cone from the center of the flower. What I'm going to do next is just erase this line that I've drawn. It's good to erase a line once you're finished with it so that you don't get confused at the end of your picture as to what was just a line there to help you and what's part of your picture. So I like to erase lines once I'm done with them. Right, now that we have the outline of our flower, we can start with our shading. The center of the Protea has got lots of these little lines that are filled with pollen, I guess, and we're going to show them on our flower just by drawing lots of lines. So this is called hatching. And when you're doing it, don't just draw a straight line. Think about the shape of this cone. Okay, so you're going to make your lines are going to change direction slightly. I'm just drawing a few so that I can keep track. But you can see that they are each going down at a slightly different angle, and that helps it to look a lot more rounded. The other thing that we're going to do is make one side slightly darker so that there's light shining on it, and it's going to help it look more three-dimensional too. So this right-hand side, I'm going to make slightly darker, and to make it darker, all I'm doing is just adding more lines and pressing slightly harder. And as I come to this center point, I'm going to start getting lighter, pressing lighter, and making my lines further apart. This is going to take a bit of work. Drawing all these little lines takes time. To here, the plant changes slightly after the bottom of this, so I need to just take it down a bit further. Right, so we're just slowly building up the lines. On this far left side, we're also going to make it a little bit darker, just to help it look rounded. But we're not going to do as much dark shading as we have on the right-hand side. Try to make these lines at different heights, so don't make them too regular. Different heights, different lengths, it will look more natural. Okay, this bottom half of the bulb that's sticking out, we're going to draw our lines in the opposite direction. So all these lines from the top of the cone have been coming in this direction. The lines that we draw in this bottom part are going to fan out, and it's going to be a lot darker. So at the base of the petals, you can start with really dark coloring. Again, just lots of hatching, so that's just lines. And it can get slightly lighter as you get to the top. But the way that we're showing the difference between these two is the direction of the lines and how hard we are pressing. So again, start really dark at the edge of the petals. And then as you work your way up, you can press a bit lighter. Okay, after you've done that, you might find you want to add a bit more shading to the top. So just keep working on it. As I said, although this is easy shading, it is quite time consuming. You have to do a lot of lines. Right, I'm fairly happy with that. I might come back and look at it again after I've shaded in my petals. Now the petals are also really, really easy, but before we start them, we're just going to add our stalk and our leaves. And the leaves are kind of overlapping the bottom of the petal. So I'm going to start with my stalk and then add the leaves on top of it. A Protea's stalk is fairly thick. If you've done yours round about the same size as mine, it would probably be the width of a finger. So we can just draw it down, and then we're going to draw our leaves coming up. So to draw the leaves, we're going to start with the vein of the leaf. So I'm starting about 5 centimeters down, and I'm just drawing a line up. And then the leaves of the Protea are pretty standard leaf shapes. So they go out from the bottom and they curve in the circular shape at the top, and they get a bit thinner at the bottom. So it's a nice easy leaf to draw. What I'm going to do now is just erase the stalk so that I don't confuse it with the leaf. And it overlapped a couple of the petals there. I'm just erasing those. So I've just drawn it. It's fresh in my mind. I'm erasing the things that could confuse me later. We'll have another leaf coming out on the left-hand side. So again, about halfway up this leaf, I'm just going to draw the line for the center of the leaf. This one's going to be at a bit more of an angle, so I'm going to curve it up, and this one will be behind the flower, so it's not going to overlap the flower. On the right-hand side, just slightly lower, we're going to draw another vein for the leaf. Don't make the leaves at the same height on the flower. They'll be slightly different heights. So if you make them all the same height, it's not going to look as realistic. Okay, let these two leaves touch. It's kind of like a water drop shape, actually, the leaf, if you look at it upside down. Again, erase any parts that you don't need. Okay, let's just draw the outline of the top of a leaf here. And we're going to add a third leaf in this part, just to finish it off. Again, we're just doing the top part of the leaf. I'm going to add a vein in there. Right, now that we've filled our leaves in, we can start with our petals. Now, your petals are pretty basic. From the bottom of the petal, we're just going to do dark shading, and then it will get lighter as it moves up the petal. So here I'm doing some dark shading. Although I'm doing dark shading, I'm not pressing too hard because I want to be able to rub this and do some nice smooth shading. So I've colored it in a bit darker at the bottom and lighter as I get to the top. And now what I'm doing is taking my finger and I'm rubbing it from the dark shading to the light shading. Okay, and we're just going to do that for each of these petals. So at the bottom of the petal, we do a bit of dark shading, leave a bit blank. Right, we've shaded the petals in the front of the flower now, so these petals that are on the far side are going to be slightly different. What we're going to do is do some dark shading at the top of them and then pull the shading down. If you did a fold in the leaf, so here I did a fold, you need to color on the inside of that fold. So the outside of the fold will be slightly lighter and the sun will hit it, and there'll be a shadow on the inside of it. Right, what we're going to do now is add a bit of contrast. You might find with all this rubbing, your petals are starting to look like a blob of grey. So what we're going to do is use our eraser and try and use a sharp edge if you have one. Just go over the tips of the flowers with the eraser and lighten them. Try not to make each one exactly the same, again, as I've said a few times. So maybe you could erase a little bit more on one side and a little bit less on the other. Some petals might be lighter than others. When we have this contrast, it makes the petals stand out nicely and stops it looking like one big grey blob. You might find the petals on the far side, you can leave them as they are. It's just these ones in the front where there's a lot of them overlapping. You want to just create a bit of definition so that each petal stands out. And something else to give it a bit of definition is to again go with your dark pencil and just get the bases of each petal a bit darker. So we're just making a really big contrast, making the tips of the petals really light and the bases really dark. And it just helps them to stand out from each other. Go over your petals with your eraser and your pencil until you're happy with the finish. Right, next we're going to work on our leaves. So for our leaves, we drew this vein down the center of it, and we're just going to leave that white. And on each side of the vein, we're going to do hatching. So hatching is just the lines. And as we get to the tip of the flower, it can get a little lighter. We might need to go around the edges of the vein just to make it stand out nicely, and around the edges of the leaf. Right, and then on the other side of the vein, I'm going to go in the opposite direction. So together it kind of makes a V shape. There's a lot of these V shapes in a protea, or triangular shapes. Okay, just go around the edge of it to neaten it up. You could also give it a rub, just a light rub with your finger to help merge it all together or blend it all together. The leaves that are in the background will be slightly darker, so we want to set them back, make them look further behind. So we're just going to add some really dark shading in there. So I think we'll do one leaf just coming off the side here, just a thin one. So it's almost like the leaf is lying on its side and we're just seeing it from the front. And you can just do a bit of dark shading over that. Make it a little fatter at the end. Finally, we're going to do the stem of the Protea. And they have nodes on them where each of the leaves come off. So we've drawn these two leaves coming off the stick, so you can just draw nodes there. And then draw a couple going down the stem that have probably been picked off. Usually when they sell Proteas, they strip the stems. The edges are going to be slightly darker of the stem. And then to show its rough, knobbly texture, we're going to do a sketching technique called scribbling, which is exactly what it sounds like. I'm just scribbling on the page. Scribble a bit harder and darker on each edge. This will just make it look rounded. And then as you get to the middle, just put less pressure on the page with your pencil, so don't press as hard. So make your scribbling a bit lighter. Right, and then we have our pencil sketch of a Protea. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please hit the like button if you did, and subscribe to my channel. I put up tons of art ideas every week.